Sounds good to me. So briefly going to talk about some work that's being done at CAIDA and with some other folks. To tell you where we got some of our data, because actually it affects our methodology, and I think our current methodology is not going to scale very well very soon. I want to talk about the community, the global community's response to what we might consider a perfect scenario. We had a week of warning that there was going to be this big virus outbreak, worm spread. There was all this news coverage. What happened? I want to talk about what we're actually seeing in hosts and some of the problems with analyses people have been doing based on looking at number of IP addresses and trying to classify domains, and talk about that. Then tell us a little bit about the victims. So we got our data. We have a /8 that we're monitoring. We had a couple /16s we were looking at originally as well. And we look for SYN packets, and that's basically what we do. We look for people trying to send port 80 SYNs to machines that don't exist, and we assume that they're trying to spread a worm. Now, obviously, it's hard to tell which variant they are because you don't get any payload. There's a lot of things going on. So right now, there's no SYN act going back to encourage payload collection. We may change that in the future. So everyone's seen this. This was, maybe you can't see it, but this original code red version 2 of variant 2 came out on July 19th, 360,000 hosts in whatever, 16 hours or something. And this led to a lot of news coverage. And that's what I want to kind of talk about first. In the week between code red coming out and, well, I was supposed to wake up again on August 1st, everyone was talking about it. It was on the news, there was press releases, NIPSI was releasing press releases. It was on every news station I had every night of that week. Every national thing, CNN ran the CAIDA video, which showed the world blowing up and being covered as red dots. We saw it being played on news coverage in other countries. People would send us email, we saw your video in this country. So from this point of view, everyone knew that it was going to come back, right? No one could possibly not know that something was going to happen on August 1st, right? We did everything humanly possible that people know, at least in English-speaking countries. Now, on the other hand, the security expert for CNN on the 30th, I believe, of July said in his 7 o'clock speech that normal people, home users, small businesses don't have to worry. Code red worm only infects large commercial sites. And a lot of other news affiliates are covering similar stories. So maybe that's why what you'll see happened. We did a follow-up survey immediately, well, not immediately, about 4 days after initial code red. We started probing the 360,000 hosts that we saw were infected to see if they'd been patched. And we picked 10,000 of them every day randomly, probed those, and went on. I don't have a... there we go. So this invisible red line that I'm tracing over is the unpatched percentage over time. And this invisible green line that I'm tracing over is the patched percentage over time. And this is only looking at hosts which clearly are IIS and are returning whether they are patched or unpatched to us. So hosts that are connection refused or connection timeout are excluded from this graph. Now, it might be the case that some of these connection refused machines are actually fixed. I don't believe that is actually true. Something else we'll talk about, the DHCP effect. So you'll see here, I will pick this screen, maybe. There we go. Well, you can't see it. Right here in the middle, these two lines start to cross, and we see a switch in the trend from most machines being still unpatched to most machines being patched. What you'll see is that point actually happens in the middle of August 1st, after it's already woken up and infected everyone again. People didn't start patching their machines until it already came out. We gave them a week's worth of notice. There was all this news coverage. The government said, please patch your machines. Microsoft was saying, patch your machines. Everyone should have known, but everyone waited until it got them again before they patched. So this is shows that we don't have the right way of getting word out to people, or they don't believe us when we suggest they do something. Whether or not you believe this is all overhyped to begin with. It probably was. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about vulnerability. So this is related to the same kind of patching. We looked at who had been able to patch before the second outbreak. And these percentages don't line up directly with the other ones, so they include the connection timeout, connection refuse. So these are lower bounds on the vulnerability. So they're more conservative. You basically see that within hosts that we were putting in the United States, that only 25% were still deemed to be vulnerable at that point. Now that was clearly vulnerable. They were running an unpatched server that we could compromise with an overflow buffer overflow. And a lot of these Asian countries had much worse repair. And if you kind of go across the chart, the more English-speaking European, the more likely it is to be patched. And then we looked at in the top 10 infected domains in the original 360,000 hosts, and how well were they patched within the few days. And the first thing you'll notice is the top 10 domains mostly contain home users and small businesses, cable modem providers, dial-up ISPs. The patching rate is small. In fact, this 40% unpatched, these are 40% of these hosts are still actively vulnerable at that time. Probably the other 60% are still vulnerable, but they've changed IP addresses because of DHCP. So very little patching happening in these things. I'd like to talk to someone from one of these ISPs who fixed things. I'm wondering if they put in a block that just filtered everything. They made everyone transparently proxy HTTP or something to protect their users. Or did you actually do something to make people fix their systems? So kind of coming back to what people were saying on the news, that you only have to worry about worms if you're a big company. And obviously all these big viruses like whatever's going around now, Suricam, whatever, they're always affecting only companies, right, not home users. So, right, that's what they say. So we noticed in some of the graphs that there's this diurnal pattern, by which I mean there's this daily cycle. You can see it kind of clearly every day, except people in the mic. Every day there's these two humps, right? And then this is the weekend, so it goes back up on Monday and comes down through the week and goes down on the weekend and goes up on the week. So there's clearly some sort of pattern of hosts coming in and off the network on a daily cycle. And people say, okay, well, there's some hosts that aren't there, but most of them are there. So what we decided to do was we used a geographic mapping service to look up the geographic location of all the hosts of these things. And we took the latitude and longitude of that and mapped it to a time zone. So we placed every host in its natural time zone and split them out by that. So this top curve, which you can't see, shows a very large, from like troughs to here, peaks to here, right, like this, of traffic, and that's for JST, which is Japan Standard Time. And you'll see a lot of other lines for all the other large time zones. And clearly, in every time zone, there's this very large daily pattern. It's not just a few hosts that are turning on and off every day. It's a third to a half of all hosts are turning on and off every day. We adjust the time scale. So the difference of this graph and the last graph is this one has local time on the bottom. So they've all been lined up into their local time zone. And if you kind of look on the curves, the peak of every day starts off about 8 a.m. and it starts falling off at 8 p.m. local time, in whatever time zone it is. So these are all machines that are being turned on around 8 a.m. or during the course of the day and being turned off at 8 p.m. in their local time zone. These are not server machines that people expect to be running web servers. These are home machines, they're office machines. They turn off when they go home at night and turn back on every morning. And these are the people that have to be let known about these problems in the future. So now we know that there's people turning machines on and off during the course of the day. And so this kind of leads to the question of, well, do these machines always have the same IP address when they get turned off and get turned back on? Because a lot of these customers are cable modem users, ISPs with dial-up. And one of the motivations of this, we looked, and at any given time, not that many hosts seem to be actively trying to spread, well under 180,000. But if you looked over the whole week, we saw 4 million IP addresses. In fact, a lot of people are doing statistics on these large number of IP addresses, trying to do domain breakdowns and things like that. So the problem we have is that there's only a certain number of machines that are actually infected. In fact, that's a very small number relative to the total number of IP addresses seen. And the trick is, how do you find out what are the hosts and what are the IP addresses that those hosts might go through over the course of a day? I'm going to put up a graph. It's really confusing to me, so I expect it'll be confusing to someone else. So basically what we did is we looked in every /24, and we counted how many IP addresses we saw in that /24 that were trying to spread a worm over the entire week of this data. And then we also plotted the maximum number we saw trying to spread within a 2-hour period. So it's basically how many hosts are actively trying to spread and how many IP addresses did they take by switching IP addresses over time. So the x-axis will be the total number seen. The y-axis will be the maximum number in a 2-hour period. And so there will be this line on the x equals y line. And anything along that line, basically everything there always had the same IP address. It wasn't moving around any. And things that are below the IP that line, or far below that line, had a lot of dynamic address use. Like there was only 10 hosts, but they were shared among like 200 IP addresses. And on the plot, you'll see the colors are kind of representing density. So it's a 3D histogram. Right, so there it is. Confusing. Okay. So this is the line that anything up kind of along this line, these are two Microsoft /24s. Anything along this line are where the hosts in that subnet, that /24, were infected and stayed on the same IP addresses because over the whole week they didn't move around any, they didn't change. Either that or they got patched very quickly and nothing else got caught in there. So that's kind of good. Everything down here is roughly fine. It means that hosts were probably being patched as they were found and they moved down. Along this axis we see plenty of things though where, say here, we saw 150 IP addresses, but at any given time, only 10 of those IP addresses were ever sending traffic. And so what this most likely means that mostly everything over in this section is a lot of DHCP going on. That there's only a few hosts that are actually infected, but over the course of days or a few hours, they're getting new leases, they're changing their addresses, they're reinfecting from a new address. And so if you just blindly try to count statistics on spread of these growths or statistics on who's infected, you'll weight more heavily towards organizations which use DHCP than normal organizations, not normal, organizations that don't use DHCP. Some conclusions that these worms, all these worms, NIMDA shows all these same trends, code red to all of them, that a third to half of the hosts are coming on and off every day, right? These aren't fixed machines, they're not servers that are trying to actually serve real content. That DHCP can affect all sorts of statistics. They make it very hard to get real numbers on who's infected. And kind of as a side human story, even with the kind of the best scenario for trying to get the word out about trying to get the general public to react to a potential security threat to the internet, we had what I would call very poor response. And it worries me about future things when we're not going to have the same amount of warning and we're going to need some other solution than getting the word out to solve these problems. That's all I've got. And thanks. And that's it. There's a URL.